What is up, guys? Today we're talking about the R3. And I have some bad news. So let's just get into it. What is up, everyone? My name is James, and this is the Engineering Filmmaker, where we talk about photo, video, travel, and tech. If these are things you're interested in, hit the button that is red down below. Rocking the sweater today with some Cuts clothing. Not the sweater, but the shirt. Feel free to stay till the end to hear some more about this. Pretty sure it's anti-wrinkle too, because I've never seen a wrinkle in these shirts. So, I used the R3 at a wedding this past weekend, and it was not all that I expected, and it's a little disappointing, and I'll go over the bad first and then the good. Now keep in mind, I did not use it as my main camera at this wedding. I only used it as a secondary B-roll camera, and I used my R5 as my main camera still because I had less than 12 hours with this before my wedding, and I wasn't going to use a brand new camera at a wedding and potentially ruin stuff. So I did some tests. I did different frame rates, different resolutions, everything at this wedding to test the footage out, and I even tried, keyword, to edit some of this footage, and that is one of the bads that we'll get to. So let's get started with the list. First things first, let's talk about internals. Switching it from RAW to not RAW is kind of annoying. In my previous video, I mentioned that the R5 has 8K and 8K RAW just in the settings. You don't have to like switch it in a different part of the menu. It's just in your frame rates and resolution settings to switch to 8K or 8K RAW. In the R3, for some reason, they decided to make it a completely different option in the menu to where you actually have to go down and click movie recording format and put it in MP4 or RAW, which is obnoxious in a way. I would imagine if you're constantly not using RAW or constantly switching between RAW and not RAW format, you would just go ahead and make custom video modes that would be able to easily be switched to. And then also, while we're on kind of that topic, there's no C-Log in this camera. There's only C-Log 3, which I don't remember if it was a known fact or not when the camera first came out, but that is kind of an annoying fact about this camera. I use C-Log 1 on my R5 and my R, and I've been using it for so long, since the 5D Mark IV days when it came out on that, and it looks super good. You don't have to worry about how you expose it. As long as you decently expose it, or a little under or a little over, you should be fine and keep that dynamic range. And it gives you a little bit more color correction in post, a little bit more leeway, make it look a little bit better. Using C-Log 3 is a little bit different because you have to overexpose 1 or 2 stops because of the way C-Log works. You will introduce noise if you do not. And if you do underexpose at all, you lose, you get noise. So when it comes to shooting at like a reception at a wedding when it's pretty dark, I was at around 5,000 to 6,400 ISO and I was still underexposed. So it's either I raise my ISO and introduce noise, or I underexpose and introduce noise because of C-Log 3, or I just don't shoot in C-Log, which I like to because it gives you a little bit more leeway in post. And then let's move on to the Ibis. There were some pretty frustrating things with Ibis, but this isn't really any new information. Just like the R5, you cannot use Ibis with a lens that has IS on it. You can only use digital IS with the lens attached. You can't use image stabilization on the lens and in the camera at the same time. That you cannot use Ibis in 6K. I would imagine that's because 6K uses the entire sensor. This is only like a 24-ish megapixel sensor, which is like exactly 6K, only 4K or 1080 with a lens that is not IS built in. So the next thing is the 6K format is in DCI, which is a little bit more rectangular than a normal 16:9 ratio. You will notice if you put a DCI clip on a UHD clip, there is a little bit of black at the top and bottom because it's not the same aspect ratio as a UHD clip. All right, so next, the 6K 60 RAW files They take up just as much space as the 8K 24 RAW files on the R5. I believe it's around 2600 megabits per second, which are ginormous. So I believe when you first turned on the camera, I had a 512 gig CF Express card and it said there was 24 minutes of footage available. So if you're going to be shooting a lot of 6K 60 or 6K in general in RAW, bring a ton of storage because you're gonna need it. And then lastly, about the internal type stuff, the 6K footage is nearly impossible to edit. I'm pretty sure the M1 MacBooks or M1 Mac of any sort are the only things that can handle the encoding or decoding of this footage. So just keep that in mind. You're gonna have to make proxies no matter what program you're using, unless you're on an M1 Mac. You might even still, I'm not sure. But I do know even in DaVinci, you have to use proxies because it struggled pretty hard. All right. Let's talk about the next thing, the external, the outside of this camera. The button to change your lens. I don't know why they did it this way, but they made a little indentation near that button, so that's how you press it. And the only logical way to press it is if you're holding it from behind and you press it with one of your fingers, or if you're facing the lens towards you and you press it with your thumb. But if you're in any other situation with the lens on, it's hard to press it with your fingers all the way down because of the indentation. It's not flush with the side of the camera body like other cameras are. I'm not saying it's in a weird spot, I'm just saying the indentations they did on the front here make it kind of difficult to press it down all the way. So the last physical part that is kind of weird is that they have an AF button next to the record button, and they're both very similarly sized and take the same amount of force to press it in. So I would assume this would mostly happen when you're in photo mode using the AF button, but you most likely are gonna press the record button on accident and start recording while you're in photo mode, and that can be quite frustrating. Not really sure why they put the video recording button right next to that button, being the very similar size they are and how close they are to each other. And they feel very similar, so you might not realize you're pushing the wrong button. I talked about all the bad that I don't like so far, and let's talk about the good. There honestly isn't that big of a list. I wasn't that impressed with this camera. It seems almost identical to the R5, but it has some features that might be good for a very specific type of person. Someone who shoots car photography or video or animals. In my opinion, this camera so far has not lived up to its expectation. It's not something I actually want to keep right now because my R5 does everything that this does, except for this doesn't overheat. That's really one of the good things, is this doesn't overheat. I didn't have any overheating issues or a timer that counted down really at all when I was shooting. For the ease of use of my R5 and not dealing with all of this, especially the cost of this camera versus the R5, I would probably still go back to my R5, and I'll probably continue using the R5 unless I can find a way to make this work. I'm gonna use it more and see what happens, and see if I can start liking it. I'm gonna give it a shot. But let's talk of the good. The image looks great. The video files, they look awesome. I mean, it puts out just as good of an image as the R5. Even though the R5 has a bigger sensor, I'm impressed with how well it does. It did really well in low light situations as well, when you were not shooting in C-Log 3. Having the ability to shoot 6K is pretty cool. I don't necessarily see a huge use for it right now. It could come in handy. I personally shoot 4K C-Log. The RAW capabilities though is super nice, but the file sizes on that 6K RAW are ginormous. So unless you wanna buy like a few $1,000s in CF Express cards, then plus a $6,000 camera, be my guest. But as of right now, the R5 in 4K, still a lot of data, but it does the job. The viewfinder and the screen look really good when you're looking through them or at the screen. It is a very aesthetically pleasing thing to hold, if that makes sense. It fits in your hand very well no matter which way you hold it, and it just feels really good to hold in your hand. With the battery in it right now, it is really light. Like, I'm honestly very impressed with the weight of this camera with how big it is and how big the battery is. It's honestly, it doesn't bother me at all. And then speaking of the battery life so far has been amazing on this LP-E19 battery. I used it all day at a wedding, it's about 8 to 9 hours, and I didn't shoot with it consistently, but I did get a lot of shots with it, and by the end of the day, I still had full battery bars on it. But that's really the good and the bad. I didn't have too much good to say about it because honestly, for the price and the issues that come with it, I'd rather just use my R5. But I will be doing some more testing and seeing what this thing can really do before I make a final decision. But for $6,000, it's for a very specific person. That's just my first impression. I don't think it's for everybody. I think you buy it for a specific purpose, not just because it's the newest, best camera. I bought it because my R5 overheats at weddings, and I figured this camera would be great for not having the overheating, plus having the extra 6K abilities and some other cool features that might come in handy. But at this point, I still would rather go back to my R5 all day, every day. So real quick, just want to talk about these awesome Cuts shirts. Like I mentioned, I'm pretty sure they're wrinkle resistant. I've like folded them up in my suitcase and they literally don't have ever crinks or crinkles or whatever on them. Solid shirt, they fit super well. They look really nice and they make you feel like a better person. You look good, you feel good. And every time I wear their shirts, I always feel like I feel good and I look good because they fit a lot better than your average everyday t-shirt from Marshalls or wherever you get your clothes. So I highly recommend taking a look at their clothing brand. I'll leave a link in the description. It is an affiliate link now, just saying. They sell shirts, joggers, everyday joggers that look like nice joggers. I showed them in my previous video. They've got sweatshirts, 1/4 zips, coats. They're coming out with all this stuff and their clothes just fit. Like I am a tall and skinny guy and I can never find clothes that fit well. Boom. So check it out in the link in the description. But that's really it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this helped you understand a little bit more about the R3. If you have any questions, put it in the link below. But just bear with me while I'm learning about this camera and the C-Log 3. So that is it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.